Okay. Hi.
Hi,
Everyone.
Amber and Angelo. I'm Melanie from DocFest. I'm here with the audience here in Sheffield. Sorry, I've just sat in on the film, so I actually feel like I need a moment. But thank you so much. Should we give Angelo and Amber, and this is Rabs, one of the programmers from the festival, should we give them a virtual welcome to Sheffield?
Nice. Thanks, Melanie.
Thank you.
So I'm just going to really quickly explain how this is going to work for the audience here. So, so the idea actually is that you submit questions via Slido. Yes, just checking it's coming. Yeah. So Rabs, thank you. So Rabs is going to lead the conversation with Angela and with Amber, and then of course we'll open up for questions. If you'd like to ask any questions, you can do so via slido.com. Oh, and then the code is 566591. They'll come up on here and I can ask them for you. But I'll leave you with Rabs.
Awesome. All right, hi everyone. I'm Rabs. I'm a programmer for Sheffield DocFest and also specifically for Ghost Narration Strand. And I'm really glad to be here with Amber Bemak and Angelo Madsen-Minax to talk about these two films that you just watched. And yeah, I'll just get started. We don't have loads of time, but we'll try and get through. So firstly, with Two Sons and a River of Blood, I wondered if you could talk a little bit about your collaboration with that film and how your collaboration comes about and then kind of how that works between you two.
Yeah, Amber, you want to take that first question? This is our third Q&A 3 days in a row.
Fourth Q&A. Yeah.
So
I
answered yesterday.
Yeah, so Madsen and I are friends. We have been friends for a while, and we're sort of colleagues too. Like, I think we've admired each other's work over the years and met up in different festivals, as a lot of us often do. And so we just wanted to make something together, just to see what that was like. So we just started the process in a super open way, just not knowing what was going to happen. We both had sabbatical we're both professors. We had sabbatical at the same time. So we decided on a place and we went, and we were just completely open. And so that's how the collaboration began. And then we just started to talk and go film places. And yeah, that's kind of how it was.
I'll build a little bit.
Sure.
Just that, like, Amber and I both work with lots of similar ideas about queer love and bodies and resistance to sort of like normative constructions of desire and belonging, and like those are all things that we wanted to like bring to the table together. And so like before we started conceptualizing what we might think about, we actually like talked a lot about what we both bring and like what might be most well suited for us to like look at together. And Amber had been trying to get pregnant for a couple of years, and I was like, oh yeah, we're trying to like find some like parallel analogies to like think through our own physicality and our own bodies together. And so like I was thinking through the lens of transness as in like giving birth to yourself, and like Amber's kind of ideas about queer parenthood and the idea of conception is also like removed from partnership. It's like a physical act you engage in. And so those were the sort of like core ideas we were thinking about. And then when Amber miscarried during the making of the film, it was actually really easy to sort of like reframe that to look more directly at death and what it's like to sort of like carry death inside you, whether as an idea or as a like pre-existing body or a currently existing body. But this idea of kind of like having something that is of the past inside you became the sort of like core that we wanted to move forward with, core idea.
And both films, I think, are deal with like a lot of similar things, which is kind of family, grief, queerness, and they're both kind of very intimate and vulnerable films. And so I wanted to ask kind of how you feel kind of having them out in the world in this way, and how that felt to kind of share that. I know with my own work, it's a way of processing things, and I wondered like how that kind of works for you.
Ambi?
Well, just to be totally honest, actually, I do make really vulnerable films, and I've been doing that for, you know, all my film career. But this film is, I'm just being really honest, this is like a really vulnerable film, and I'm still actually finding my way in how to navigate talking about it. So yeah, this is like the most personal film I've ever made. So it's tricky, you know, because usually intimacy, it doesn't always feel vulnerable cinematically, you know. It actually can sometimes feel kind of interesting just to be in front of people being like, yeah, you just saw me have sex, or you just saw my vagina or whatever, but like that doesn't really mean that we were intimate, you know. But this film is like so private, and like you said, processing things. Like I think that Madsen and I were in a process when we started working together. We were very much focused on like what was going to happen, and like he said, like we changed the frame of it, and the frame became a bit more vulnerable.
I think too, though, there's something in the idea of like, generally when you like build intimacy with another human or a group of people, it's through longevity and trust and cultivation, and people earn intimacy, right? Like they don't just like, it's not, you don't just walk in a theater and intimacy is like bestowed upon you. Like, so there's, I mean, it's sort of like a weird tension wherein like, in viewing something like this, like, I think it's easy to fall into the space of feeling like entitled to the information as a viewer. Like if something is on screen and you're passively consuming it, then you feel sort of like intrinsically entitled to that information. And I think like for us, part of like the way we approach vulnerability on screen is that like it is, I mean, I feel this way, at least, I don't know, Amber, like, but I feel like we're giving a gift to the audience, and like they have a lot of like, I don't know, it's risky because like they didn't earn anything, you know? And we're basically saying, you don't have to, it's okay, here it is anyway. And like that's like the big, I don't know, that's the part that feels most challenging for me. But yeah, I mean, Amber is like always naked in her videos. So like, not that the body is the same as intimacy at all, but you know, like that's a layer of a thing. And like, I'm generally like a little bit removed from my work. But at the same time, like hyper in it. Like I just sort of like use a veil of like intellect sometimes to like shield the intensity of the affect, but like that doesn't mean I'm not like super in it at the same time. But yeah, I mean, this piece is like way more, I use subjective voice in a way that I don't in other work. And I don't like poeticize it at all. Like, not to say the film is not poetic or whatever, but like when my subjective voice is speaking in North by Current, it's not a poetic voice. It's very like factual and straightforward, and sometimes, you know, misleading even.
Yeah, I mean, that was going to be one of my questions, which is kind of how does this work depart from, I know your mother in the film describes like, or asks if it's going to be like your other work, and I kind of wondered, how do you feel it compares, or how do you feel it's a departure or not from your other work?
Yeah, I mean, my work is always about like considering mythos, considering ideologies, considering like various ways people like define themselves and who they are in the world and engage their relationships and cultivate meaningful intimacies, and the kinds of relationships they have to time and death. Those are like always core questions for me. So like, I don't think the work is very different there, but the work is definitely more narrative. It's straight up narrative. And it's also PG. Like that's basically the only difference. is that like there's nothing that could be like considered like grotesque sexuality. Besides that, though, I don't think it's that much of a departure. But I mean, I did set out to make a film that was like significantly more accessible for a viewer than some of my other projects, and that was sort of like the one intention that I kept throughout the process. Lots of other things shifted, but like that, like, okay, this is going to be a movie that like lots of people can access from different points, and they don't have to necessarily like be a experimental film person to like find something in it.
Melanie, do we have any questions from the audience?
Yeah, we've got a few. So the first question is for Angela, and they start by saying, I loved North by Current so much. Thank you. How does it feel how does it feel working so closely with footage of yourself, and particularly pre-transition?
I don't have any feelings about pre-transition footage. I've been trans for like 15 years. Like, I'm a very integrated and fragmented person at the same time, like we all are, but like, I don't really have thoughts or feelings about old footage besides the fact that I look really cute. And that I wish my skin was that supple still. I mean, I think for me, the most interesting thing about looking at footage of yourself as a child, it's like you don't actually have those memories inside you. So like when you look at the footage, you're actually creating a memory based off of a visual you're seeing that's external to you. So like that's interesting. But definitely like, looking at yourself is unpleasant for most people, like especially if you're like having a conversation, you're like, oh my God, I sound so stupid when I talk, or like I say like so many times. I'm like that's just stupid. So of course, like, no one wants to like listen to their own voice or like watch the way their face is asymmetrical when they speak or whatever, but you get over it. Like bodies are bodies, and we don't get to pick our skin suits. So is what it is.
Thanks. We've got a question for both of you, which is about the narration, saying the narration of both films are so beautifully poetic. Did any of the narration begin as poetry before the visuals? How was the narration pieced together?
Yeah. Amber, you want to talk about it for Two Sons?
I didn't hear the last sentence that you said. I'm sorry. How did the narration what?
Sorry, let me say it again. The narration of both films are so beautifully poetic. Did any of the narration begin as poetry before the visuals? Okay. Yeah. Or how was the narration pieced together?
Yeah, Madsen and I both write a lot to figure out what we're doing. Or at least we did for this process, and I usually do. So we wrote quite a bit, and we wrote that narration together. And I think that we wrote it alongside developing the visuals. So it wasn't something that, we wrote it almost as a frame for Two Sons.
It's a little bit similar for North by Current too. Like, Amber and I both like, shoot things more improvisationally, watch footage, write about it, reflect on it, write about it, reflect on it, watch it again, write about it, write something that might lead somewhere else, and then shoot that thing, and then watch that thing, and then write about it, and then write about them next to each other, and then write about them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in a row. It's just like lots of like exchange between writing more freeform, and then shooting in response to writing, but then also writing in response to shooting. So like images you have that you're kind of responding to versus text you're generating that you're responding to with image. It's really just kind of I don't know. It's obviously very calculated and carefully curated and organized and all the things, but a lot of it is just kind of like excessive amounts of production, like lots and lots and lots of writing.
It's also like following the lead of where things take you, Also.
I kind of have a question leading on from that, because I think that both films, you talked about the kind of change in Two Sons, but also in North by Current, you kind of described that you went in hoping to make this film about the criminal justice system, and then it kind of pivoted. What made that pivot, and how do you feel about kind of where it ended up?
Yeah, I will say, I think when I started working in the film, I was thinking about it a little bit more like an investigation of sort of like white rural masculinity and how that's kind of reflected in the urban land, in the rural landscape in a way that's like very different from what people generally think of when they think about the carceral body and the prison system and police brutality. It's usually through like a kind of urban lens, and specifically with people of color. So like I was kind of like wanting to like put that idea in my home space, and within the scope of my personal relationships. And then like as I started working on it, it just it just transformed. I mean, it became really clear, like when you start shooting, you can start with an idea, but like if the footage you capture is not reflective of that idea, you don't stay married to the idea, you go with whatever the footage kind of offers you. And the film, because I was just, I mean, in some ways it's like, of course, if you're like dealing with your family, how could it be anything but personal? And I knew it would be personal to some degree, but I definitely did not know it would be as personal as it is. That was a ramble. I forgot what the actual question was, though. I do this all the time.
It absolutely made sense. No, it was
cool.
A perfect answer. No worries. Was there anything else from the audience, Melanie?
Yeah. We've got a question asking, are there normative narratives about the child or childhood that you aim to challenge or critique?
For me, yeah. I mean, and I think I do this in kind of like all my work, but there's a few main things that I'm hoping to kind of like rub up against, especially with regard to like queerness and transness, which is that like there's no kind of linear narrative of the way people transition. Not that this film is about my transition at all, obviously, but it's like I'm really interested in investing that idea of like cyclical time and non-linear time and putting that hand in hand with the idea of growth and ontogeny and childhood, and also like self-actualization, development, the ways in which you go from child to adult or female to male or whatever are all just kind of like different blocks of this kind of like map of ontogeny. And I think without sort of like context and subtext for all those things, they're just exponentially less interesting. And like that's what Hollywood films do, is they take away all that context, they take away all that subtext, and they make this sort of like linear idea of what ontogeny looks like, and then they sort of like project it onto every narrative. And so I mean that's something that I'm actively resisting all the time. I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Well, that's exactly what it was about. It was about
Okay,
this kind of challenging the normative narrative. I mean, it was particularly about around childhood, but
okay. Just making sure I didn't like totally. I'm like such a like rambler. I like will get way out here and be like, wait, what was the question?
No, you're on it.
But yeah, I mean, like, I also think like, you know, people love to like to hold up images to like legitimize their right to be trans or their right to be whatever way they are by being like, look, I looked like this when I was a child, you know. And it's like, I don't really care if I looked like a really pretty little girl, you know what I mean? Like there's no disconnect there for me between like who I am now and like the fact that I was a really pretty little girl, you know what I mean? Like I don't really give a shit. So I think just like, you know, rubbing up against these like kind of confines that you have to like sort of subscribe yourself to a particular brand of masculinity or a particular brand of, you know, gender or whatever. It's just like yawn, boring. And I think I sort of like hammer it home in the last, you know, few phrases of the film where I'm like writing this sort of like makeshift letter that's like, you know, you were born between a trine of powerful feminine energies, and like I'm leaving the film letting you know that I don't have any issues with the fact that I like have a feminine energy inside of me. And like I think most people I'm getting into bad territory. I think like most I don't know, I think like obviously it's hard to like gender energy or whatever, but like I think feminine energy is like powerful and is valuable and should be championed. And I have nothing to hide there by like embracing feminine energy. And a way to like honor my own process and my own growth. Yeah, I don't know.
That's something that was one of the reasons why I was so excited about this film. I think for me, like both of these films together as well, was kind of this rebuke of the kind of Hollywood narrative around queerness, family, and transness as well. So I'm really grateful for those things. I don't know how much time we have left because we ran over a little bit.
Oh, I'm told we have 5 minutes.
Excellent. Do you want to go ahead with another audience question there?
Yeah, we've got one more question asking if it's okay about David's death, and asking whether or not, like, about the impact of David's death on the film.
Yeah.
By Corinne.
David passed away in April, I guess. So it's very recent. And I don't know. I guess I'm still thinking about it. I mean, the thing that's a bummer about it, obviously, besides the fact that he died, is that, you know, my sister is like having a really hard time. So that means in terms of like exhibiting the film, you know, she's like, she already was a little bit on the fence about whether she wanted to see it because she thought it might make her really sad, which I think it probably would. You know, it's some hard stuff. And so I have a feeling it's going to be longer before she's ready to see it now, maybe a couple years or more. But you know, I mean, I don't think his passing will have much to do with like the life of the film or like what the film does or means to people. It's all just like my own personal shit, my own family shit. So like, I mean, even though it seems like you're sort of getting everything when you watch the film, you're only getting a little tiny bit. And, you know, we all have like long, complicated lives off screen that are all over the place. And yeah, so I guess I don't totally know how to answer the question right now.
Yeah, I think please do let us know if there's any more questions, but otherwise I think, yeah, that's everything we've got from the audience.
Maybe I'll just ask one last one, which is, I know that both films had quite a profound effect on me, but how do you both kind of see or hope that that the films are received by audiences kind of beyond your immediate kind of communities? I think I always think about the people around me and what they kind of will see in it, but you know, it's interesting when it's put into form like a festival and various different people see these films. So kind of what do you hope or what do you think about in relation to that?
Amber?
I think that it's so funny to say this because it feels antiquated, but it's true that people like still don't talk about miscarriage at all. Like when this was the third miscarriage that I had had in a year, this film. And, you know, I was just like Googling and trying to get any stories or information. And like, it's a really painful thing for people to go through and it's really taboo. And then when you bring like queer conception into it and like the way that queers get pregnant and the way that queers, all the shit we have to do it and the money and the time and the doctors and like all that stuff, like it's a whole other journey that isn't really talked about at all. Like I was, you know, it's just not there. And so I hope that this is like a call out on a really personal level. I mean, there's lots of intellectual stuff I could talk about, but I hope that this is like a call out to my people out there who have gone through that, because there's a lot of us. There's a lot of us, and like we don't talk about it. And it's better to talk about it, and it's better to share stories, and it's better to fantasize about it, and it's better to create art about it and myths. And I just want to be having that conversation with people and making people feel like, I don't know, it doesn't have to be so private. This is a thing that happens to bodies with uteruses a lot, you know? So that's really important to me on a very basic personal level. And that's why like the vulnerability is worth it. Cause I'm like, fuck, like this is crazy that this is just like never out there. Like there's nothing, you know?
I think for me, what the film does really well in terms of an audience is like, or in terms of offering to an audience, is like taking things that are like super, super specific and micro, like so hyper personal and hyper individual, and like blows them up to be like really, really not like accessible, but I just feel like so much of the film just feels really like universal, and like people can really kind of like see their own experience in it, even though like the way my family is being kind of like investigated, for lack of a better term, is like so hyper specific to our bodies, our experiences, our place, our town, our like familial structure, our like interrelationality, our childhoods. It's like super, super, super specific all the time. But then at the same time, there's like this sort of like macro step back where like everything is sort of like in this schema that is just so kind of relatable, because everybody has to come from someplace, and like you have to like deal with the fact that you came from someplace. Yeah.
Well, thank you both so much for your vulnerability and for sharing these films and these works with us. I know I'm really grateful, and I'm sure that there are a lot of people in the cinema too who are really grateful. So yeah, thank you so much, and it's been great having a chat with you. Thank you, Melanie, as well.
Thank you, no, thank you. Thanks, Angela. Thanks, Amber.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much.